G'day, hello, welcome to Stories from the Stool. To do today's story, I've gone all the way back to my childhood home in Gunnedah in country New South Wales. That's the home over my back shoulder. And over that shoulder is a garage, which is also part of the story. Today we're going to be talking about sulphur-crested cockatoos. Now, do you know what a sulphur-crested cockatoo is? Well, let's see if we can find one. Here are some pictures, and you let me know when you see one. I beg your pardon, what did you say? A hippopotamus? I've never heard of an animal called a hippopotamus. I'll have to look it up. But what are we looking for? We're looking for a sulphur-crested cockatoo. So on we go. Great, you found one, a sulphur-crested cockatoo. And he or she is at the heart of today's story. You see, when I grew up, my father was a vet, and he used to look after all sorts of animals, and one day a big truck rumbled up our driveway, and a huge man with muscles on muscles got out of the truck, and he was nursing a sulphur-crested cockatoo with a broken wing. And he gave it to my father, and he said, "You're a vet, you fix it." Well, Dad had fixed all sorts of animals, but he'd never fixed a sulphur-crested cockatoo. So he put it in a dog cage in the garage and forgot about it. The garage these days is full of other bits and pieces, and the dog cage is now actually under the house. And it was up to my brother, a little bit older than me, and me to look after it. So we did. We fed it bread and seed and water. Then after a few days, now remember it was a wild bird found by the side of the road, we let it out of its cage, and it began to walk around behind us just as though it was a dog. One day, it actually went into the kitchen there when Mum was baking scones, and he walked around the kitchen and followed us, and then walked outside again. So he was a bit of a cockatoo, and he was perhaps a bit of a dog too. Well, after a few weeks, when we let him out of the cage one day, he flapped his good wing. That was good. Then he flapped his bad wing. And it felt so good that he flapped them together, and next thing you know, he flew up into these trees that I'm sheltered under now, the old apple trees, and you might hear a bit of their leaves whistling in the wind as I'm talking. And he looked down at us, and we looked up at him, and he said, well, he didn't actually say it in our language, but you knew what he was thinking. He said, "My wing's better. Bye-bye. I'm out of here. I like you guys, but I like the wild better." Now, I was only 7, 8, 9 years of age, and I was going, "Bye-bye, Cocky. I'll miss you, Cocky. I love you, Cocky." And that was what we thought was the end of the story. Except it wasn't, because about 2 or 3 days later, we heard this, "Ah, ah." Cocky had come back. He was sitting in these trees, and he sort of said, "I like the wild, but I like you guys better. Can I hang out with you?" So for the rest of his life, or her life, he sat on a windowsill outside Mum and Dad's bedroom at night, and that's where he slept. He no longer slept in a cage, and late at night, when he thought no one was listening to him, he tried to repeat his name. We just called him Cocky, and you'd hear him going, "Cocky, Cocky," really trying hard to say it. And during the day, he would not only follow us around, sometimes he'd spot Mum's car driving along the road, and he would fly from gum tree to gum tree to gum tree, following Mum's car. Sometimes my brother and I would put him on the handlebars of the motorbike and would bang it down the road as fast as we could go, and Cocky would have his wings out and he would be going, "Ah, ah." It was fantastic. Now, there were other times where he was a bit mischievous, because we had a donkey, Banjo. And Banjo used to get really sick in the tummy, and she used to lie just over here in the dust feeling very sorry for herself. And Cocky whistle in the leaves right now. And Cocky used to sneak up behind and pick up her tail. And she hated anyone picking up her tail, so she'd flick him through the air and he'd go way right off into the distance. And he loved it. It was the best ride at the show. So he'd go again. Hooray! Hooray! He'd do it time and time and time again. Unfortunately, Cocky was an old cocky, and sometimes old cockies, well, they like me. They start to lose all their feathers. And Cocky, before you knew it, had lost every single feather, and he had no clothes at all. So Mum made him pyjamas, and they were long grey school socks with a red loop, and she'd pull them down over his whole body, and Cocky would walk around going, "Who's a good-looking cockatoo now?" He loved it. Unfortunately, one day we woke up and Cocky was no longer there. We don't know what happened to him. But to this very day, the beauty of Cocky and the beauty of stories is that he lives up here and he lives in our hearts as well. And perhaps he now lives in your hearts too. Do you have a good story about an animal or a bird with a broken wing? Maybe you'd like to share it. That's Stories from a Stool for this week.